Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality, pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, please do send in your messages. Please do tell us where you're calling from. Send us your greetings on this January evening, almost February. The year is rushing in already. We have a packed show for you tonight. The main story is going to be the increase in the United Kingdom's projected population by 5 million in the next 7 years. That's an increase each year of over 700,000 people. Clearly much over it. In fact, it's far more people than 5 million. It's actually 10 million. 5 million is the net figure. And we'll get into looking at what they mean by that. And then we'll get into looking at what are the justifications that the establishment press and politicians will give for this incredible number, which is not necessarily set in stone, of course, because everything can change on a dime. We'll also be looking at Trump and the deportation controversy and looking to see how that will influence and might even apply to the United Kingdom. And lots more besides. So if you've got any comments on those sorts of things, if you've got any questions on those sorts of things, send them in and we'll do our best to read them out. Welcome to the people watching on TikTok. Send us your comments and your questions. And what do you think about the Scottish National Party? We hear today that their budget is going to be approved by the Lib Dems and Greens. So it is going to pass, but we knew it was going to pass because Labour said that they would not vote against it, even though they would not vote for it. So it was a done deal anyway. Any comments on that, please do fire them in here. And folks, if you're watching on Twitter, please give us a repost. That's the way our message gets out there. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe. And if you're watching on Facebook, please give us a share. That's the way all this message gets out to a new audience. Fantastic. Let's read out some of your comments. Derek is first in tonight. He says, "Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is well. First of all, congratulations to Princess Beatrice in having a baby girl. Also, it's shocking that Liverpool, Birmingham, and Manchester will double their population through immigration. That is unbelievable, but that's the world that we're living in today, Derek." Hello to Debbie and to Oksana and to Kat. Hope you're all doing well. Richard says, "Good evening, everyone. We shouldn't be letting 10 million into the UK in the next 7 years. We shouldn't. We should be removing the same amount in a shorter space of time. Enough is enough." Hello to Alan and to Catherine says, "Hello from England." Well, the 10 million is from the front of the papers today. We got the Times. Population to grow 5 million in a decade. Well, that's not actually correct. It was projected to grow 5 million between now and 2032, which is 7 years, not a decade. So I guess they don't have their proofreaders doing so well on the Times these days. Anyway, it says here, the arrival of 10 million immigrants is projected to bring Britain's population to 72.5 million, according to figures published yesterday by the Office for National Statistics. By 2032, the population is forecast to grow by 5 million. The 10 million minus 5 million presumed to be emigrating in that time. The figures prompted calls from across the political spectrum for a reduction. Number 10, however, ruled out setting arbitrary caps on the number of arrivals. It's expected that almost 10 million people will arrive and nearly 5 million will leave, bringing net migration to 5 million. Now, this figure of net, they always talk about net migration, which is not really the correct figure to use. And I'll get into that in a moment. The correct figure to use is the 10 million figure. That's the people that are coming in that need to be catered for, new people coming in that need to be catered for. But what's the justification for all of this? Go into the paper in more depth. Migration staggeringly high, but cap isn't the answer. The cap's not the answer. So we shouldn't be capping the numbers coming in, apparently. The Prime Minister's spokesman said Sir Keir Starmer wanted to reduce the level of immigration, but ruled out setting arbitrary caps. Well, caps would not be arbitrary. They would be specific. They would be 10,000 here, 5,000 here, 15,000 here, and no more. They don't need to be arbitrary. They have to be specific. That's what we need, specific caps. Nevertheless, Keir Starmer's spokesman says, we're going to publish a white paper to set out a comprehensive plan to end these staggeringly high migration numbers. Well, just ask me and I'll send you an email and I'll explain how you can do it with the stroke of a pen, signing some emergency legislation. And this 10 million will never come to pass. 5 million will never come to pass. There'll only be a small number coming in because you are the government, Sir Keir Starmer, and you can do anything. Anything. The Office of National Statistic projections assume net migration levels will settle at 340,000 per year from mid-2028 onwards, if nothing else changes. But that's still incredibly high numbers, considering that prior to 1997, many years, there was negative net migration, meaning more people were leaving the UK than were coming in. Now we've got to be content with about 350,000 net coming in? Of course not. So what's the point? What's the justification? Well, you'll perhaps not be surprised to know the justification is an economic one, because the government, for some reason, wants to see growth figures increase. And these growth figures are measured by gross domestic product, which is all the goods and services in a particular year added together, measured against the figure from last year. And the government's always want to see a percentage increase in that. And somehow that's meant to benefit the rest of us, when of course it clearly does not necessarily, because you can have high GDP figures or you can have growing GDP figures, but our incomes per head can be relatively decreasing. And that's all that matters to you and I, is our income per head. We don't care what the growth figure on a piece of paper is. We care about what is our income per head. That's the only growth measurement that matters. GDP does not matter. Anyway, according to the Times here, Any reduction in migration, they always use migration instead of immigration. Any reduction in migration means economic trade-offs. Okay, what's the economic trade-off? The Resolution Foundation think tank estimates that the population growth projected by the ONS will bring 400,000 more people into the workforce, and wait for this, boost GDP by about 0.3% by the end of the 2020s. So by 2029, our economy will have 1/3 of 1% growth. And that's justified. 10 million immigrants bringing 1/3 of 1% growth to the economy is what is the justification. The justification for 10 million immigrants is 1/3 of 1% growth. Do you see how ridiculous this is? How utterly ridiculous this is. Now, before I want to go into the absolutely disgraceful editorial in the Times, which is hailing this as some great thing, I want to talk about net immigration so that you understand what's at issue here. We put together a graphic today just to describe this, and we'll just put it up and I'll just run you through it so that you understand what this is about. Here we go. The formula for net immigration per year is gross immigration, which is all the immigration coming in, minus gross emigration, and that equals net immigration. In other words, I minus E equals N, where I is the number of all the long-term immigrants entering the UK, and by long-term we mean staying for at least a year, which is the UN definition, minus gross emigration, which is the number of all the long-term emigrants leaving the UK. However, we cannot control the number of people who choose to leave the country. People are going to leave the country willy-nilly as they want. We can't keep them here. So we cannot control variable E, which means that we cannot control the net immigration result. The only variable there that we can control is the number of people who enter the country. And therefore, it is the number of people who enter the country, the gross immigration figure I, which must be targeted. And we control I, we control the gross immigration by setting limits on numbers of visas distributed and by policing the border appropriately. That's how we control I. And as for the gross emigration figure and whatever the net figure may be, these should just be left to fall where they may. So trying to target net migration, saying we want to get net migration down, it's another fool's errand. It's not possible to do. You can only target gross immigration in. That's the only variable in that equation that you can control. So that's the one that must be controlled. And it's not just me saying this. We have detailed files here at the office, and I was looking through some of them today in order to bolster my point. And this one was taken from City AM, which used to be a newspaper, I think mainly in London. This is from the 28th of February, 2014, 11 years ago, by the editor, Alistair Heath, at the time. And he spoke about targeting net and how foolish that was. He said, a non-authoritarian government, even one in complete control of migration policy, cannot possibly target net migration, which is a bizarre Malthusian concept deliberately designed to confuse the public. That's because net migration is the difference between the people who come into a country and those who leave. It is an unachievable population growth target that weirdly takes no account of births and deaths. If fewer Brits decide to emigrate, net migration can go up, even if immigration goes down. Even if the government were able to control the number of foreign nationals coming in, it quite rightly cannot stop British citizens or other foreign nationals from leaving, let alone force them to leave. This is as it should be, but it demonstrates the absurdity of targeting something over which the authorities have, by definition, no control. It demonstrates the absurdity of targeting something over which the authorities have, by definition, no control. Alistair Heath writing 11 years ago in City AM. Isn't that what we've been saying all along? We should not be targeting net immigration. We should not even be talking about net immigration. We should be talking about targeting gross immigration in. And in that regard, there's lots of policies that can be done to cut down on the numbers. Let's have a look at some of the comments here. Alan says, exponential growth can kick in, and 5 million residing here can quickly become 10 million, and 10 million becomes 20 million, and so on. It's just madness. Oksana thinks that Starmer has no intention of capping immigration. Exiled Viking is in frosty Budapest, says hello. Greetings from far off. Hope you're having a good time there, sir. Alan just does not think that Starmer will do anything. Starmer and the Attorney General fought side by side for immigration to flourish and for money to be thrown at them. If anyone thinks they're going to tackle immigration, think again. You're possibly right. But what we can do in this time is to plan for what needs to be done to normalise the immigration restriction conversation in order to encourage a change in the culture so that younger politicians will arise who know exactly what needs to be done and who can kick all of these old ideas into the past. Stephen says, importing economically inactive people from abroad will not increase GDP. That's correct. It's going to either keep it stable or decrease it, and in any case probably make life harder for the rest of us. Certainly incomes per head are likely to get lower. Stephen says about 58% of all incomers are largely economically inactive. That's because many people on work visas and student visas can bring in their dependents. And where will they all live and work? The Reform Party, says Oksana, might do something. Well, they're the only hope at the moment for changing the conversation. And they're succeeding in doing that on social media. And in that way, they're also putting pressure on the establishment parties. But there's going to need to be a clean out, and there's going to need to be a clean out of some of the editorial staff on the national newspapers as well, because that brings me to this article in the Times today, picking winners. The Times, 29th of January 2025, just for posterity and for the court case as well, I might add. We will discover who wrote this. Britain's population is set to grow to 72 million by 2032, and all of the increase will be due to more immigrants. That's no problem if they are the brightest and the best. Deep breath, actually, on that. So it starts off by saying that the supply of workers in the United Kingdom would be bleak if we were relying upon simply more people being born than dying. So in other words, setting it off like the Britain's future is doom laden because we're not having enough children. Well, that's a load of rubbish anyway. As I said last week, you don't need to be for the population increasing or for the population lowering. These things come in waves, and the economy will adapt to the population. And a deserted island of 100 people can have a very successful economy. But you put 1 million people in there and it will have a very bad economy, although it will have a very high GDP. In fact, the Times tells us that it will be nigh on impossible to reverse this dearth of births. Well, again, complete rubbish. You can turn that around if you wanted to, if you had the policies to do so. Anyway, it's convinced everybody it hopes that, goodness me, how are we going to survive? It's got the answer. We're going to get the best and the brightest from the rest of the world. In fact, we're going to quote harvest talent from abroad. Britain can become a truly vibrant economy. They love that word vibrant, if it is prepared to throw open its doors to the brightest and the best. Well, let me tell you something about that phrase, the brightest and the best. That is simply a euphemism for mass immigration. And there's several ways that it's a meaningless phrase and also a very dangerous phrase, because, they talk about welcoming the best and the brightest. And certainly that sounds preferable to welcoming the worst and the dimmest. But we don't want the best and the brightest either, because there is literally endless millions upon millions of people out there who, in many cases, are better and brighter than many of us, relatively speaking. And so when you say the best and the brightest, you're really just referring to the rest of the world. Okay, people think in their heads, and it's a sort of classist thing as well. They think, best and the brightest, that must be like, professionals, brain surgeons, doctors, dentists, and, rocket scientists or something like that. But no, these phrases, best and brightest, it's all relative to the particular job at hand. Some people are very, very good at menial tasks. Some people are very, very good at extremely difficult heart surgery. So everybody is best at something. Everybody is bright in their own way. So when you talk about the best and the brightest, you're really just referring to everybody else in the world. And there'll always be somebody who's better than you and brighter than you. For example, say you live in a little village here in Scotland and there's a job going at the local supermarket, stacking shelves. You might actually be the best person for that job, because maybe somebody else is overqualified, or somebody else is going to give up that job as soon as they get a better paying one or something like that. So you actually may be the best person for that job, and you may get that job stacking shelves. Nothing wrong with that. However, if you're competing against the rest of the world, if you're competing against 10 million people coming into the country in the next 7 years, I can guarantee you there's going to be lots of best people for that job that you're going to be competing against now. So there's always going to be somebody that's better than you and brighter than you and is going to get your job if you have an open door immigration policy. So people who say, we just want the best and the brightest. No, we don't. We don't want anybody. Now, anybody like that, the person that wrote that in the Times, right? The person who wrote that article, he needs to be taken out and he needs to be put on this show with me, and I will give him a talking to, a serious dressing down, and he'll be like, "Oh, sorry, mate, you're right. I got it wrong. But these guys were paying me £500 to write that nonsense. Will you forgive me for that?" And I'll be like, "No, straight to prison. Straight to prison for confusing our people with your clever nonsense." Now, there's a lot more that I want to say about this best and brightest rubbish that we hear. And just stick with me while I find it. Here it is here. So yeah, it's, as I say, it's all founded on this idea of the holy grail of modern economics, which is growth, which is measured by the gross domestic product figure, which we're meant to be told if it rises year on year, that's a good thing for us. It's not necessarily a good thing for us at all. The only good thing for us is if our incomes are rising in proportion to the cost of everything. Income per head, that's what's the proper measure of growth. No other measure is relevant. Anyway, the disingenuous leader writers for the national press are only interested in serving the interests of essentially capital. They're only interested in serving the interests of capital. Now, and imagine, like, say, for example, we do get this much heralded 1/3 of 1% growth. And who's ever in power at that time goes, "Wasn't that wonderful? Isn't it so good that we brought in 10 million people in 7 years because we've now got like 1/3 of 1% growth?" Like, what are we meant to do? Like, stand outside our front doors clapping, hailing the god of growth for some arbitrary figure that we're told is good for us on paper? Oh, well done, well done. We finally achieved 1/3 of 1% growth. It was definitely worth it to bring in 10 million people into the country for that. I feel so much more empowered now, so much more of a sovereign individual as a consequence of that wonderful growth. No, it's still just baloney. It's all baloney. And we need to blow this gaff wide open. We need to blow this gaff wide open. All that rising GDP needs to just go with the wind, and don't think, oh, because that person's an economist, that person has got your best interests at heart, or that person even knows what they're talking about. Because very often these economists aren't original thinkers. They're stuck in their little rut whereby, oh, GDP is a good thing. What increases GDP? More and more people increase GDP. That'll be the answer then. You know, they don't think about tomorrow. So many people don't think about tomorrow. They don't see what's on the other side of the hill, as the Duke of Wellington said. One of Britain's founding fathers, and that's another quote of a British founding father. He goes, "Politics, like war, is knowing what is on the other side of the hill." And if our politicians held to that, then we'd have a much more sensible political culture, a much more effective one. But at the end of the day, Britain is not just a balance sheet, okay? Britain is not just a corporation. Britain is not just an economy. Britain is a nation. Britain is our home. It's not just a business, it's our home. And in our home, we want peace, and we want security, and we want stability. And we don't get that by leaving our front doors open for the rest of the world just to come in and use our home and then leave again, or invite more of their friends into our house. That's not the way a nation is meant to work. A nation must have secure borders that are defended. And in the modern day, that means setting very strict limits upon who gets in and for how long. And then when it is their time up, then they have to leave. Because we don't want our home to be changed out of all recognition. And as I said earlier, we shouldn't have to compete. We shouldn't have to compete with the rest of the world for jobs. We're perfectly bright ourselves. We're perfectly best in our own way at doing whatever job is required. And we shouldn't allow ourselves to be confused by this best and brightest talk as if there's only a certain number of best and bright people out there. No, we're all best and we're all bright in our own way at doing whatever is required of us. We don't need anybody else from any other country to come in and do whether menial jobs or professional jobs. We'll do those jobs ourselves. Thanks very much. And, you know, this disgraceful editorial from this disgraceful person who wrote this, and I would really like to know who it was, by the way. And if that person is watching, do contact me and we'll have a chat and we'll make it public as well, because I think that would be a really, really good piece of video. Okay, so if anybody knows, get this off to the Times and we'll sort this out. But I do want to give this person a talking to. Anyway, what this person says is we must be prepared to, quote, harvest talent from abroad. Harvest talent from abroad. Now, that's also known as extractive capitalism. Okay, what some countries do today and what countries have done in the past is they'll go to countries and they'll harvest their resources, as in, for example, their mineral wealth. And it tends to be looked down upon nowadays. It tends to be called imperialism. But that's a form of extractive capitalism. If you're actually taking people, not the mineral resources as such, but that country's population resources, if you're actually extracting them, harvesting them, to use that phrase, then you are just like an economic imperialist. That's all it is. It's just like another form of capitalism. It's like a modern day slavery. In the old days, we took the people from Africa, we took them there, took them from there, often against their will, obviously. Today, we're taking the people from Africa or the Middle East or wherever willingly. They're coming willingly. It's in a sense, it's the same form of extractive capitalism. This is just the modern day version. And I'm sure there were people in the old days who said, oh, we need slavery because guess what? It keeps inflation down. It keeps wages low, which means that the high cost of wages don't feed into prices. And so people pay less. And in fact, people did justify slavery in that way. And today, what we've got is people justifying the harvesting of the population resources of other countries in order to keep inflation down. And a few weeks ago, we played a video of Boris Johnson himself saying that one of the reasons that he wanted to open up Britain's borders was to stop an inflationary spiral. So it's all just pure economic thought. It's not any kind of national thought about what is actually best for the nation, for the people who live in the nation. No, all they care about, it seems, is the bottom line of GDP and low inflation, and they think that's served by bringing in endless numbers of people who themselves create their own demand for more people. So how about this? How about having the best and the brightest use their undoubted talents to build up their own countries, to make their own countries better and to make their own countries brighter? How about that? And you know what? Maybe we also in the United Kingdom can help them do that. We can help people stay where they are to build up their countries, to make their countries better, to make their countries brighter, instead of thinking that we have some right to harvest them over here. And so I think I've said everything I want about that phrase, the best and the brightest. But believe me, you're going to be hearing it a lot, and you're going to be hearing variations of that a lot. And some people in America as well, around Trump, have also been using that phrase, because while Trump's very good, it seems, at the moment in getting rid of the illegals, he's also got a very weak spot in thinking that America needs the best and the brightest from abroad. Well, America doesn't. America's got plenty of talented people already, just like Britain's got enough people who can do the jobs that are here. But that's a phrase you're going to be hearing a lot about in the next 2 or 3 years. They're going to be using that phrase to justify it, but it's just a euphemism for mass immigration. That's all it is. Catherine says, Alistair for First Minister. Thank you. I don't think any of the political parties want me, because I'm too radioactive, unfortunately. But hey, thank you for the thought. Paul Hadlow says, unbridled capitalism and communism are both evils. Yes, absolutely. Paul says, this is interesting. He says, I worked in a pack house packing vegetables. It had a workforce of 300. Sometimes I was the only British person in the building. Incredible. Exiled Viking, who is presently in Budapest tonight, says, Hungary has hardly any non-European immigrants. All I see are lovely Hungarian people in every shop, cafe, and public transport. Yes, and they you'll notice as well the media, the sorts of people who write stupid editorials for the Times, they're very down on Viktor Orban. Oh, he's too right wing, blah blah blah. Goodness me, anything but. He's just a Hungarian nationalist looking after the interests of Hungary. That's all he is, and has not somehow been infected by the post-war disease that swept through the West. Quite a few of those former communist countries weren't affected by it, which is interesting to think. Oksana says Lukashenko is a good leader. Oksana, you're just going to have to remind me what country that is. Sorry about that. Yes, good comments tonight. Good comments tonight. Good. Dominic says it's a dual system, capitalism for the rich and socialism for the poor. Yes, Lukashenko, Belarus. Yes, he is a good leader. Again, another leader that they go, oh, he's an authoritarian. We can't have him in the West. He's terrible. Yeah, he's running his country like people from Belarus want his country to be run as, but we get told he's a bad guy. Those days have to end. Absolutely. We have to just see through all of that. One good way is switching off the television and just going on to Twitter, quite frankly. The television is a terrible lie machine. Always has been, always will be, basically. Anyway, other than GB News, some of GB News stuff is very good, I must say. Be good to be invited onto GB News. I've been asking them if they want me for since they started, but apparently they presumably have got other commentators from Scotland that they draw upon. Cool. Now, what else did I want to talk about today? Yeah, Trump. The Trump thing. Now, and that just takes us interestingly in from immigration control in the UK to what's happening in America. And Trump has been quite vocal, or at least the people around him have been quite vocal in bigging up the deportations of illegals, okay, people who are not meant to be in the country. And I'm just going to just bear with me here. I've just got to save something. Okay, yeah, so this has been causing problems. The deportation has been causing problems among the establishment press, because they do not want, and people don't see this, like the establishment press is not our friend. The establishment press serves the interests of big capital, always has, always will. And when economic things threaten to get out of hand, they'll try to bring everything back in again. And the establishment press wants mass immigration, always has, always will. And so what's this? This is the this is the Sunday Telegraph of the 12th of January. Did a very interesting article here. America voted for mass deportations. What will Trump deliver? And yes, I did spend like an hour and a half reading the whole thing so that you don't have to. And the person writing it, who will remain nameless because I can't actually pronounce their name, EIR is the first name, Nolse, Nolsoe. Don't know if that's a man or a woman, but they're clearly against mass deportations. And we get told a sob story here about, as you're going to, you know, as the establishment media will always give us a sob story about these things. But what I found mainly interesting about this is that the angle they're going with is that, quote, removing millions of people from the workforce would also drive up inflation and slow growth, economists say. And this is the idea that the illegals in America are doing jobs off the books for wages that are lower than normal legal wages, and somehow this is a good thing for the economy. Now think about that. If you can only run a national economy on illegal labor, which is being employed on illegal wages, then what does that tell you about your economy? Does that tell you that that economy should even exist? Perhaps if a industry is only surviving because it's illegal, then maybe there's deeper issues there that need to be addressed. And that point is never once mentioned in this article. And again, as I mentioned earlier, people like this person who wrote this article, 200 years ago in America, they would be writing articles about how it was a bad idea to abolish slavery, because if we abolished slavery, then, quote, it would drive up inflation and slow growth. They would be the same people writing those articles. And you can take that to the bank. You can take that to the bank. It's the same people because it's the same attitude. It's the same mentality. It's the same economic reasoning. Goes on, there are doubts about whether companies would be able to replace undocumented workers. Well, maybe that's just too bad for that company. Maybe that company will need to change in some way to ensure that it employs Americans at good wages, at legal wages. And that's just their economic argument that they're just always going to bring out. And what we see from the impact of mass deportations is a dramatic decline in US economic activity in multiple sectors. says Hinajosa Ojeda at the University of California, who I think has probably got a dog in the fight, quite frankly. Even if Trump deports only 1 million, it would result in an economic downturn. 8 million is basically we're in depression territory, close quote. Well, again, are we really saying that the American economy that we're meant to be told is so strong actually just depends upon illegal labor at illegal wages? Maybe. But if that's the case, something's gone very, very wrong in the last few years. Well, we do have we've got a video actually of the man who runs immigration and customs enforcement in the USA, who's been appointed by Trump. His name's Tom Homan, and he was stopped by I think was it a Channel 4 person or something like that. Let's just run that video and see what Tom's got to say for himself.
Are you treating migrants humanely?
Yes.
But there's been reports of them on planes with no water,
That was a bunch of
complaining.
Crap. That was a bunch of crap.
What do you mean a bunch of crap?
ICE detention facilities have the highest detention standards in the industry. Any of the ICE standards, our detention standards are higher than any state or federal or local facility in the nation, in the world. Someone should go to the ICE website, look at PBNDS 11, performance-based detention standards, and look at our detention standards, highest in industry.
But are you sure you're only getting illegal criminal migrants? I mean, there were some pictures over the weekend of people that claim to be students, Brazilian students, who were showing examples of bruises on their arms from American deportation flights.
That's ridiculous, but if they want to make a complaint, it'll be investigated.
But your assurance is what?
The men and women at ICE are professionals. We do this for a living. And I can tell you, I ran ICE for years. I was the first director of ICE came up through the ranks. Again, these men and women are professional, highest detention standards in the industry. We take care of these people. But we're going to enforce the law, and we're not going to apologize for doing it. And
you're going to do it in a sort of public way with, do you need to use the big military planes? Is that part of a sort of shock and awe tactic? No. They haven't been used before, have they, for migrants?
No, we got President Trump. We're going to use all the government to secure our border, which is the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. And we're going to enforce laws to this country. It's not okay to enter this country illegally. It's a crime. And when you cause a crisis as big as the Biden administration caused, when you overwhelm the Border Patrol, but they can't do their national security job, that's when the fentanyl come across, kill 250,000 Americans. That's when you have a 600% increase in sex trafficking. That's when you have a record number of no-inspected terrorists coming across an open border. President Trump's going to secure the border as promised to the American people. We're going to enforce immigration laws. That's what we're going to do, without apology. We're on board. We're going to go forward. You're going to see it get a hell of a lot bigger in the near future.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, that's the right attitude, not backing down. And what you'll also hear is, in fact, in this article, the person who wrote it was saying that in some cases, some of these illegal immigrants in America have had children who are technically American citizens. And so this stupid point was made here that what happens if the parents get sent back, but the children, because they're American citizens, don't get sent back? What will that do? That will split up families. And it says here, if this was done on a large scale, many children would be likely to end up in the care system at a cost to US taxpayers. Now, was the person who wrote this really suggesting that if Mr. and Mrs. whoever are sent back to Mexico and they've got an 8-year-old child who happens to be an American citizen, are they going to leave the 8-year-old child in the care system? Of course not. They're going to take the child back with them because that's part of their family. Okay, so there's going to be no danger of any family getting split up, providing the parents love their children enough to take their children wherever they go. And of course, if the child's older than 18 or 21 or whatever it is, then the child is an adult who'll make their own way in America. So the idea that families are going to get split up is just for the birds. That's not going to happen. Children who are under age will be staying with the parents. And so if the parents get deported, the children are going to go with them, okay? It's not difficult, folks. It's a fairly straightforward thing to understand. And yes, I mean, one of the executive orders is to end birthright citizenship, which is a good idea. Stephen agrees with the ICE director. Exiled Viking wants to know, is AFFG going to be out in the streets shortly? We'll keep you informed. If you want to know, sign up to us at a forceforgood.uk/up. There we go. forceforgood.uk/sign-up. If you're signed up to that, you'll be kept in touch with what we are up to, sir. Now, there's another, while we're on the subject of Tom Homan, there's another video that's worth playing as well, and it's about what Trump might do with the cartels. And that's going to be an interesting thing as well, because they're saying that he might like literally attack them, you know, with the military. Let's run that video as well.
What do you know about the Border Patrol agents exchanging gunfire with Mexico drug cartels from earlier?
They have taken gunfire, and it's going to get worse, Sean, because President Trump's going to seal that border. He's going to put the cartels out of business. He declared them a terrorist organization. We got the whole of government is going to dismantle these people and wipe them off the face of the earth. They're not going to go. They're not going to go lightly. We're taking them out of the trafficking business. We're taking them out of the smuggling business. We're taking them out of the dope business. There's going to be more violence on the southwest border. That's why Trump committed to calling the terrorist organization. He has. That's why the entire United States government is going to take care of those people and abolish them. We're going to attack them not just in Mexico, but in the 42 countries that Jalisco cartel is currently residing in. The Trump administration is going to take them on just like he did the caliphate, and we're going to destroy them.
Well, crikey, that's tough talking. And the question is, if that could be done under Trump, then why has it not been done before? And that's always puzzled me as well, because like America will send their, well, it doesn't puzzle me, I know exactly why, of course, but America will send its soldiers and weapons to the other side of the world to bomb, you know, Afghan tribesmen who are literally virtually no threat to anybody other than each other. But on their own border, they'll do nothing about violent gangs that come over and literally just kill people in America. They'll do nothing about that, but they'll send soldiers to the other side of the planet. We do the same in Britain, you know, sending soldiers to the other side of the planet. For why? Meanwhile, our country is literally being invaded, albeit peacefully, across the English Channel. It has to stop. What it says is that we're not a sovereign country, because a sovereign country defends its own borders before it defends anybody else, before it gets involved in any other wars. And I talked about Lord Palmerston's famous dictum last week. We should have no allies in the world, and we should have no enemies. We should only be looking out for our endless and perpetual interests, putting Britain first before the rest of the world. But if we put other countries on a par with us or above us, then we're not sovereign anymore. Anyway, it's an act of a sovereign government to expel people who are here illegally. And the thing with Trump doing it is that we can see him doing it. And what that does is it normalizes it over here. It allows us to be able to say, well, our foreign criminals, the illegals in this country, the fraudulent asylum seekers, they all need to be deported as well. And on a lighter note, there was an actress this week called Selena Gomez who, for some reason, decided to post a video on Twitter of her crying about what she presumed were, what we have to presume were her fellow Mexicans getting deported from America. And she was crying, as some of these types like to do publicly. And she got such... People were taking the mick out of her so much that she actually deleted the video, but not before a lot of people had had a big laugh about it. And there's a video which I'll play in a moment of her crying, but somebody has superimposed upon it animated characters of the Trump family dancing under her tears to the Vanilla Ice song, Ice, Ice, Baby. Let me just bring that up. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. We'll run through this a couple of times. But these are animated characters of the Trump family.
Let's kick it. Ice, ice, baby. Ice, ice, baby. All right, stop. Collaborate and listen. Ice is back with my brand new invention. Something grabs a hold of me tightly. Flow like a harpoon daily and nightly. Will it ever stop? Yo, I don't know. Turn off the lights and I'll glow. To the extreme, I rock a mic like a vandal. Light up a stage and wax a chump like a candle. Dance. Crush a speaker that booms. I'm killing your brain like a poison.
That is so funny. It said 9 million views as well. And you just look at that, and I think it's Melania with a hat on that really just makes that. It's like, well, you might be crying, but we're loving it. We're loving it.
Let's kick it. Ice, ice, baby. Ice, ice, baby. All right, stop. Collaborate and listen. Ice is back with my brand new invention. Something grabs a hold of me tightly. Flow like a harpoon daily and nightly. Will it ever stop? Yo, I don't know. Turn off the lights and I'll glow. To the extreme, I rock a mic like a vandal. Light up a stage and wax a chump like a candle. Dance. Crush a speaker that booms. I'm killing your brain like a poison.
There you go. More of that, please. Oh my goodness me. Well, that was a funny note to end on. We're at the top of the hour there. Catherine says, yeah, children have to go with their parents, of course, don't they? Absolutely just. Richard says it's a big mess, invasion, immigration into Britain and other countries. It's a big mess. We have to be the voice of common sense against it, and we have to use the time that we have in order to chart the common sense route and hope that we can win. But believe me, we're up against it. We're up against big powers and principalities and wickedness in high places, as some people will understand and recognize what I'm talking about there. Xana says Selena Gomez is not fully Mexican. She maybe is just LARPing as a Mexican, as they say. Good. Well, folks, we are at the top of the hour, so we'll be back, God willing, next week. Thank you for your comments. I hope you've enjoyed what we had to say tonight. Please do, if you're watching on Twitter at this stage, give this a repost. Let's get this out there so that other people can see our words of hope and our words of wisdom. And on Facebook, give us a share. But whatever you do, please give us a like and a thumbs up. Thanks to you all. Take care. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.